Hey everyone, welcome to the research panel here at Ship 25. I'm here with Matt Allford and Charlotte Fleming to talk through some of the research that we've been doing this year. Hello.
How you going?
Hi everyone, how you going?
So we've done 3 reports this year that we're going to talk through today, plus there may be a sneak preview of something else. So stay to the end to get the little bit of a leak of information of something new. We've looked into GitOps, platform engineering, and compliance, and we're going to talk through those today. But first of all, I thought it would be useful if we introduced ourselves. So I'm Steve. I started the research effort here and have worked at Octopus for a little while. I'm in the continuous delivery space, and I also work with the DORA team at Google on the research that they do, one of their community guides. And I'm just super curious about software delivery, and I have been for a long, long time. So that's kind of what I bring. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So my name is Matt, and I'm a developer advocate here at Octopus Deploy. I've been here for a lot less time than Steve has, and I have the benefit of relying on the brains trust that you see here, being Steve and Charlotte, who undertake all of the amazing research that you're about to see in this session. And then I get to help create some content around that. And sometimes that's in the report itself, but also exploring the findings in separate mediums like articles and videos to share with the world, which is really exciting. And I've spent most of my practitioner life in the operations side of the world, but for the last 5 or so years before joining Octopus, I worked really closely with developers to help them ship their applications, which has kind of allowed me to get really interested and curious about software delivery. So that's really cool. And how about yourself, Charlotte?
So I am a research assistant at Octopus, and I've been here actually even less time than Matt. But I have, as Matt said, I do the research with Steve. So I contributed to the platform engineering pulse report, which we're about to talk about, and I have been working on a few other things. So I do all the surveys and then the data analysis with Steve, and then we kind of work through and make a report, which is really cool. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think one of the reasons this is like a really cool trio of people is because we bring very different perspectives from practitioner perspectives, development and operations, like that perfect DevOps thing, with also that research skill that we're now bringing into it to kind of up our game to do the research far better than what we started with. So it's really useful. I think that crushing together of good research skills with real life experience is where we're going to find out most discoveries. So with that in mind, let's talk about the Platform Engineering Pulse Report. This was a smaller survey that we did in order to start finding out where we should be investigating platform engineering. So we needed to go out and find out a little bit to know what questions we then needed to ask. We're going to be doing a larger platform engineering report, which will be coming out next year. And we also worked with some of our friends from the CNCF on this, such as Saim Safdar, to do interviews with people to find out a bit more about platform engineering as well. And we brought that together with some surveys. And we're going to look through only a handful of things that we found in this report. With all of these, if you're interested in what we share, there's loads more to find. So definitely download them from octopus.com/publications. These are all free to download. And let's get cracking into the platform engineering space with this first graph. So this one is, it was interesting to me because in the community, we were talking a lot about why you would adopt platform engineering. And the really common things that came up, and I don't know if this is the same experience that you've had, is let's reduce cognitive load for developers. Let's improve that developer experience. Like there was a lot of stuff that sounded a lot like let's make developers happy. But those things don't seem to have made it onto this list.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, I guess it was one of the first things that comes up in the report. And straight away, there's kind of, I guess, an interesting finding, which was contradictory from what I guess the literature currently or previously stated. So you can see that improving efficiency and standardizing processes were the 2 top reasons. And if you go down the list, it doesn't mention anything about, I guess, cognitive load or burnout. Which is really interesting. And I mean, I think if I remember correctly, there was rarely anything mentioned like that in the top. Sorry, what was it? There was rarely any sort of developer mention in terms of the reasons why companies were implementing platforms, which is really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed to be like a nice side effect to get, but it's definitely not the reason that people are spending their hard dollars on it. So efficiency and standardization and productivity are all words that maybe are a little bit more associated with scientific management rather than maybe modern transformational leadership styles. But equally, I think we can understand that those are the things that must be driving the pain for organizations. So having too many different ways of doing things, having almost like too much sprawl in their estate, and they have to solve that problem. So that's what makes it worth spending money on. They don't want to make developers' lives worse. They'd like to make them better as part of this, but there's more painful things at the top of their mind.
Yeah, exactly. And it's likely that, I guess, I mean, we don't know that for sure, but it's likely that reducing burnout and cognitive load is an indirect effect from implementing platforms like this. Yeah.
Yeah, I was at a user group in London a couple of weeks back, and I shared this chart with them and said I was really surprised because I was expecting to see those cognitive load and developer experience items up on this list. And they basically stared back at me, and they were not surprised because they're in the trenches doing it, and they know that the platforms that they're using or building are being driven by other things. So I was more surprised, I think, than practitioners. So if you are either a platform engineer or a developer using a platform, this might not be as surprising to you either, but that's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was not surprised to see, obviously, standardized process up towards the top there, but it was interesting to see these reasons for adoption. And Steve, I want to pick your brain actually just for a moment. The third one down, increased developer productivity. I know you're somewhat passionate about the word productivity because what does that even mean? And it's interesting to see that here. And I guess from my perspective, it's a general. I would see that as a general theme of having a platform, like the developers should be more productive for whatever that means in your organization. But that one I was really surprised to sort of see it in the top three.
Yeah, productivity is a bit of a trigger word for me because on the one hand, if I made something and I didn't know what it did, but I wanted to sell it to people, I would probably use the word productivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can promise people it will 10x productivity. And because no one has really sat down and worked out what does productivity mean, what's the point of it, what value is it going to bring, it means that they can never really disprove your 10x claims. So that's one of the most common places I see the word productivity is when people are trying to sell you something and they don't really have a better reason to sell it to you. And the other part of me that kind of twitches around productivity is we've seen time and again that optimizing one small part of an end-to-end value stream makes no difference unless you've chosen the right part to optimize. So whenever you're throwing productivity around, very often, especially when it comes to things like platform engineering or other tools in this space, productivity ends up boiling down to how do we make programmers type faster, which is not the route to value for any organization building software. So I try to encourage organizations to actually sit down and keep working on that phrase of productivity until they have a clearer picture of what that means. And it shouldn't be lines of code or number of pull requests or even number of features, because they aren't necessarily numbers that will result in better sales or higher value sales or increased attainment of whatever the organization's goal is, whether that's making money or saving bees. Those are the things that we want it to relate back to. And if your productivity doesn't increase those things, it's not a useful concept.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It kind of reminds me a little bit about the entire work stream and looking at it all kind of like you just alluded to. And if you've got a part of your work stream, like if your pull requests are taking 3 days on average to get reviewed by the team, but you enable them with tooling that helps them code faster at the start, where's the, is there actually a productivity gain there? Because you've probably enhanced an area of the workflow that didn't need it, or improved an area of the workflow that didn't need it, and you've still got that same original bottleneck that you had.
Exactly. And the original bottleneck still exists, but you've now made it worse by pushing more things towards it. Which actually makes it quite a toxic problem. If the code review is your constraint, you don't want to add more things to the queue for code review. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I've just done, in my, I guess, a teaser, which we'll tease today, the next report that I'm doing is based on AI integration, and code reviews a huge constraint. And the integration of AI speeds up some things, but not other things, including code review, unless you have found a way to work on that process really effectively with AI. But otherwise, platform engineering is also being used to, meant to increase developer productivity. And it makes sense. It does make sense, really, when you think of those things together, but is it actually doing it? And how is it actually making the developer more productive? That's, interesting.
So the next chart that I'd like to get into, this is actually one of my favorite charts, because the more I stare at it, the more interesting things get. So let's pull up this radar chart of mandatory versus optional platforms. So half of the chart shows where the platform was mandated. Half of it shows where it was a free choice by the developers. And then if you look at it from the other diagonal, it shows the producer rating of the platform, whether it meets its goals, versus the people using the platform. And it tells quite an interesting picture. Charlotte, do you want to explain to us how to read this chart so that we can all stare at it in wonder?
Yes. So I created this chart on Python, and it was very exciting when it finally came together, with Steve's help, obviously. So we've got the producer mandatory over on the left, and we can see that obviously that's the largest portion. That represents 88% of I guess, respondents, in which producers working on the mandatory platforms rate that they are meeting the goals. And then when we go further down the bottom, where producers is optional, we can see that producers working on optional platforms are actually split down the middle. So that's 50% is telling us that they're meeting many or all of their goals. So there is a bit of there's a bit of a split in perception here, in that producers really think that they are producing a great product, and when it's mandatory, it's working, except when it's optional, less people, I guess, are using it, right? And so there's a bit of a divide here between consumer perception and producer perception, which is interesting.
Yeah, because the interesting comparisons, whenever you go to a diagonal, you can kind of compare something. So when you look at producers' view of mandatory platforms versus consumers' views of mandatory platforms, there's a huge divide. And one of the things that this has popped up a few times recently in conversations I've been having, this feels a little bit like the old pre-DevOps problem rearing its head, because the producers on a mandatory platform are achieving all of their goals, but maybe they're not achieving the goals of the developers. Maybe they haven't even asked what the goals of the developers are. So this is definitely a problem that needs to be overcome within platform engineering. Is like, we need to kind of quickly rewind and revise some of that DevOps, reduce the silos, increase the collaboration, and maybe make sure that the goals are shared between those two different teams?
Yeah, I've been having some conversations with platform engineers as part of a series that we've kicked off for Inside Platform Engineering, and the very first conversation I had with Luke Phillips was heavily around non-technical things, and platform engineers or the platform team talking with and collaborating with the users of the platform being such a crucial role of platform engineering teams. And that has come up in every conversation I've had. I think I'm up to episode 3 or 4 at the moment, and it's reared its head every time, because it's such a, we look back on IT from 20 or 30 years ago, and we could kind of be the folks that were sitting behind the keyboard, and we didn't have to talk to the business or the people or even other people in IT. We could just sit there and do our tasks and everything was okay. But some of this information really shines a light on the importance of understanding your users. It's like being at a product company, right? You need to really understand the needs of your users and what's working well and what's not working so well, and where can you focus your energy to make it all about the customer, or in this case, the consumer of the platform.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's try and have more conversations across that divide. And what I'd love to see would be these numbers coming closer together, because the platform team is now trying to achieve both sets of goals with the platform. Or if it's not goal related, because they now understand that the developers are experiencing some pain with their platform, and then they go and solve it, and then the developers increase their rating that they're meeting the goals of the platform. So I'd love to see this become more of a circle.
Yeah, that'd be really good.
So let's dive in to our next insight. And again, this is another one that I enjoyed it. It brought me some genuine joy and delight. I'll quickly describe what we're seeing here. This is a comparison of, again, we're looking at whether platforms are meeting their goals. And we're looking at that in terms of how many metrics the team is tracking around their platform. And there's a very strong pattern from one metric up of this increase. So if you measure more different things around what your platform's trying to achieve, your platform is more likely to be successful. But there's something interesting going on the left-hand side of this chart. Could someone explain to me what that is all about?
Sure. So this essentially, the 0 is 71% of respondents have 0 metrics in which they track their performance or success, is obviously questionable, because if you are not tracking any metrics, how are you making sure that you're achieving your goals and, I guess, performing at all? I think Steve coined it zero metric success illusion, and it is very accurate. So where platforms are reporting their high success rates simply because they're actually not tracking any data. So it is a bit of an illusion, because how are they aware? How do they have any knowledge of whether or not they're meeting their goals? And do they have any goals? Have these have they been, I guess, has it all been planned out, and has it been strategized, and do they have goals to meet? And if they don't, then obviously it's going to appear successful, and that's what this is showing.
I think it's interesting because there's probably a certain number of organizations who need to do platform engineering because everyone else is. So for them, being able to answer yes to the question, do you have a internal developer platform, probably is success, because they just wanted to imitate what successful organizations are doing. But that likely will become a bit of an anchor on their teams if they don't start translating it into real benefits that a platform should have.
Yeah. And Matt, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was but it was kind of a joke, because I used this the zero metric success illusion in my personal life when, I think I've had a great week of like eating healthy and that sort of thing, but I don't actually track it. I'm like, oh, I've had 2 salads this week. I must be healthy. But then if I was to reflect on that, I'm probably not. And Steve's actually seen my expense reports from when I travel, and he's probably seen the rubbish that I'm eating and thinking, what are you doing, Matt? So, and what's really interesting, or when I look at this data here about the more metrics, the more success. The other thing I'd say about the metrics that are being tracked, and folks out there, you may be doing this already, but if not, I think it's really important to understand from the people in your business who are funding the platform engineering initiative is to really understand what they are funding it for. What are the goals that they are trying to achieve from the platform? And then make sure that you in the platform team are trying to measure things that correlate directly back to that. So if one of their crucial metrics is to improve the security of code being delivered by the organization when they ship an application, then make sure that that's one of the things that you're measuring in your platform. Because if you're off measuring something else, while that may be helpful in other scenarios, when the folks who are funding the platform and investing in the team and driving it through the organization get asked, are we meeting the goals that we set out to? They're a bit like, we can't really correlate that. So if you're struggling for metrics to measure that you think will have an impact, that's where I would advise starting.
Yeah.
And I think there's an interesting relationship that we're going to see becoming quite important here is understanding why you're investing in a platform, and then measuring that is going to be how you keep the platform when attention starts to move elsewhere. There is always something else coming along that's going to want to displace that funding. And one of the things I don't want to see is all these developer teams who are now using a platform and it's solving a load of problems be left abandoned. They'll be stuck on a platform that's not getting maintained because investment's been moved away. So platform teams need to kind of move, especially from that 0 area, somewhere up this graph into tracking some metrics and showing benefits, so that when people kind of start questioning it, why do we bother with platform engineering? They can say, here are the reasons, and secure that funding, for the longer term. Because you can't really leave developers on a platform that's not got that long-term funding. That's going to be a disaster. That's worse than never having a platform, because they will effectively start hiring people that don't know some of the things that the platform does because they don't need that knowledge. If the platform disappears, there'll be a lot of skill acquisition required.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the metrics you are tracking, I'm now remembering when we did a bit of a deep dive into what people were tracking. It was DORA metrics, which was great, but a lot of organizations actually lacked that developer focused, any sort of metrics relating to developer feedback, and that is a recommendation that we made in the report. So you just have to have a broad, holistic sort of way to gather feedback and metrics to, which related to higher performing groups and teams. Yeah,
we recommend 4 metric categories, and that feedback from developers is an entire category on its own. It's so important. We'll throw some more information about Monk metrics at you if you need to know how to measure. But you need to go beyond single point. You need to kind of look broadly at different criteria.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at our final chart in the platform engineering space, which is this one, which is about how long it takes for your platform to be successful. Charlotte, you drew this chart. This was another one of your Python creations. So do you want to quickly explain to us what this shows us?
Yeah, so we've got our little graph here, and it's based on the organizations meeting many or all of their goals by the years of experience, which is on the years of experience is on the x-axis. So this kind of resonates with a previous report which Puppet and Dora have produced, which essentially says that after 3 years in which your platform becomes mature, you're going to experience more success. And success is you're going to be meeting more goals. And essentially it will keep going. The idea is that initially you may meet a few quick, easy goals, and then it might plateau, in which we recommend to persevere, because you really do see those kind of extreme success rates after year 3, which is really awesome. Yeah.
I think that's one of the crucial points, is knowing that it might take 3 years to get to that highly successful zone shouldn't mean that you kind of go to the stakeholders and say, come back in 3 years, right? We'll show you what we've done, because that won't lead you to success. You have to work out how you're going to get the first small win and then the next one. And it's the sum of all of those that turns it into success, rather than it being, it's not 3 years of work and then success. It's like 2 weeks of work and a small win, another 2 weeks of work and a small win, repeated over and over, because you want those feedback loops so that you know whether that new thing you've added is having an impact or not.
Yeah, exactly. And having that, I guess, longitudinal data, you can see by basic decisions and how much they affect success in meeting goals, and you can see it in quite a clear pattern. And so it's really interesting when looking at the data, that it kind of just goes initially up and then down, and then it really does rise up. And that's where, that's the goal is, 3+ years.
Yeah. And we see that a lot in software development, this J curve. We saw it with TDD. There's an initial cost as everyone's trying to work out how to write tests and design their code to be testable. And then over the longer term, like, you end up kind of traveling up that hockey stick and getting huge benefits. So it's one of those things, sometimes when you measure something over a very short term, it just tells you to stop all attempts to make things better, because it always takes time to practice and get good at a skill. And I often forget that whenever I'm talking about like testing techniques. I forget how long it took me to go from writing my first test to actually being good at it, and it being a way of writing better software. It did not take me weeks. It took me much longer, I'm embarrassed to say. But don't be embarrassed. It's fine. Learning takes time. Okay, so to sum up the Platform Engineering Pulse report, the adoption reasons aren't as DevX as we thought they would be. There's a big divide between how producers and consumers view the success of their platforms. And one of the ways that we might be able to bridge that divide is by measuring the right things. And that should be a combination of the goals you've been given as a platform team and the goals developers have, because the platform has to solve both of those. Let's now move on to our State of GitOps report. This was a large study. We got 660 responses to our survey. And we also did interviews with expert practitioners to help us go beyond our own kind of silo of knowledge. We wanted to get different perspectives on it. And we found out so much interesting stuff in this report. And again, there was a lot of interesting crossover. Code reviews comes up a lot. We've mentioned it already on the call today. It definitely relates to AI. It's come up in the as part of continuous delivery, the importance of having fast code reviews. And that's definitely something which applies to GitOps as well. But let's first take a look at the model we built around the research. So there's lots of boxes on here, but what we have mapped out, and we have lots of diagrams to explore on this, but what we mapped out was there are a whole bunch of GitOps practices which are based on the Open GitOps principles. There's a website dedicated to the 4 principles of GitOps. That's what we use to inspire what we were looking into. And they bring you a whole bunch of GitOps specific benefits, which is what's in this purple box. But they also happen to increase your DevOps outcomes as well. So your software delivery performance and the well-being of teams and the reliability of your services. So there's this really positive effect of these GitOps principles and applying them through the right practices that we found through this research.
Yeah, it was interesting for me to be able to correlate this backwards, leaning on the Dora's research here between organizational performance and DevOps outcomes. And as you work your way through the report, you kind of see that these high performers of GitOps practices and the impact that it has on those things that are categorized there in the DevOps outcomes, which in turn, of course, leads to higher organizational performance. So, yeah, for me, it was really cool to see that sort of correlate all the way through.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people missed that in the Dora research. So I think they did it on 2 separate years. They actually went out and tested the relationship between things like software delivery performance and these organizational outcomes. And when we talk about those organizational goals, we're talking about things like market cap and the share of market in their space. So these are like real world useful things that the organization really needs. Not just like, oh yeah, the organization is cool. It's they're actually winning the market. So super important.
Yeah, and I think that, and this is in the report that you wrote on this, Steve, but it was that you can't, I guess, half do GitOps. The benefits are there when you adopt as many practices as possible. And so, yeah, the correlation, as you both have said, which is there, which is awesome. But the distinction of the declarative state and how much that actually affects high performing teams and low performing teams, I found really interesting. Yeah, I just found that really interesting. And also because I'm new to technology, like to the tech industry as well. So just coming in and actually finding that declarative state was like had a significant impact on performance, and also a significant impact on whether or not you adopted other practices. I just found that really interesting. That was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, and the idea behind declarative state is that you don't have like a step-by-step, build foundations, add columns, put on roof. You don't do that step-by-step. You just describe the building, and then it allows this whole new class of tools that know how to get you to that state. So you don't have to define it. And that's more robust because you're saying it should look like this at the end of the process, which makes it quite testable. Whereas if it runs through a step-by-step sequential process to build the thing, you would then need some different validation mechanism. So declarative state is a great way of saying this is the thing we want. I think that's what makes it different to the more imperative styles of defining things like infrastructure and what applications you would like running. And interestingly, we know that like the DevOps model, which is really huge and has loads of capabilities in it, those capabilities are just options for you to add. And you're right, Charlotte, on this one, this is really, I suppose, GitOps would be that capability. But within that, these items aren't really negotiable. And we found a lot of people weren't using continuous reconciliation and automatic pull. And effectively, they were also then saying, but we don't seem to be getting the benefits of GitOps. And so there seems to be a real limiting factor of not doing all of the things on this list. So it's worth checking to seeing if you've got something missing and adding it in if it is missing from your GitOps implementation.
Yeah, I think it was, as I'm trying to remember, I think it was something like 16% or 18% or something were the survivors of the funnel that had the highest performing teams. And it was because they had adopted most of all of the GitOps practices. Yeah, and it was kind of a stark. There was a very obvious difference.
Yeah, it's really like in terms of how many organizations are doing all of this, like they're not missing anything. It's a really low number. I think it's about 16%. So it suggests that most people doing GitOps have definitely got room to check back and add the missing pieces to their list. Yeah. Which segues quite nicely into looking at those relationships. So everyone brace yourself for lots of purple lines. The reason this diagram looks quite cobwebby is because we didn't want to just say, do GitOps, get benefits. We wanted to work out which specific practices resulted in which specific outcomes. So we have things on here like increased security and drift prevention and auditability, lots of really cool things, which is like, these are the reasons GitOps exists, to give us these things. And what we found was there are certain practices that impact many of those outcomes. So things like version control, obviously, if you're not in version control, it's definitely not GitOps. So it impacts a lot of the outcomes, but so does automatic pull, which is something a lot of people aren't doing. So if you're doing GitOps and you're surprised that you're not getting those things on the right, this diagram helps you to kind of explain why you're not getting them. And some items don't impact as many things, like human readable formats. That benefits there are mostly for auditability and for reducing access. That's where it kind of had an impact. But that's still super valuable. So even though there's only 2 lines, don't underestimate how important they are.
Yeah, and there's a really cool interactive diagram on our site, which you can pick and choose, and you can see if you pick one, it'll show you more clearly, I guess, the connection here. Responsive code review and version control and automatic pull, they're the 3 practices which lead to all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're making a big difference. And the way to use this is to start from the outcome that you want to achieve, and then just follow the lines backwards to the practice that will help you achieve that outcome. And in many cases, it's not a single thing. That's very common in DevOps. Is we'd all love there to be one thing we could do and it solves all problems, but it's more complicated than that. And we have a similar diagram for the DevOps benefits. And we looked at the DevOps benefits because we wanted to be able to connect GitOps back to something that everyone is familiar with by now. I think software delivery performance, those 4 key DORA metrics, there's 5 now if you're keeping up to date with the research. That's kind of an important thing, is to be able to connect it back to other work that's being done out there. The DORA research in particular, we're big fans of, and we love seeing what comes out of that incredibly well-honed research effort. It's been going for over a decade, and they've definitely inspired a lot of what we've done. So we wanted to connect it back. It's important to connect as well GitOps to that bigger picture. Software delivery performance is like a next layer out, and then going out again to those the benefits to the business. That's how we want to kind of think about everything we're doing, is like widening out the criteria for what we think is success rather than ticking off a checklist. I will now get off this soapbox. Shall we move on to, this is the relationship that we found. So along the bottom of the scale, we normalized everything to a score to make it more comparable. And along the bottom, we've got the GitOps score. So the more of those individual boxes that you have implemented, the higher your score is. And we did the same thing with the software delivery metrics. We assigned that so that the more of those you're achieving, the higher your score is. And we found there to be quite a strong relationship. So the higher you score on GitOps, the higher you score on software delivery performance. We have similar charts as well for well-being and for reliability. But this was probably the most pronounced chart in terms of having a narrow error bar and a very steep incline.
Yeah, this is sort of one of the big findings from the report, right? And I think before I saw this, I knew that it was going to be an upward trajectory, but I didn't expect it to be a differential of what have we got, 40 there, almost on the left-hand side from the lower GitOps scores to the higher ones. So, and for me, this comes back to what Charlotte said earlier around those the GitOps principles, especially the automatic pull and the continuous reconciliation, just really strengthening that GitOps score. And then, of course, here the impact then that has the flow. It's like a flow-on effect. So yeah, super important.
Yeah, so if you're hesitating on those automatic pull and continuous reconciliation items, this should be the inspiration to go back and finish the job. That's probably how we would summarize the GitOps one. Go back and just fill in those gaps, and you should then start seeing this kind of benefit, which is absolutely awesome. So there really isn't a half of a GitOps. You have to do the whole thing. It lands more in that maturity model zone than a capability model zone. It's got its own set of benefits as well as benefits to things that we already are probably measuring. But it does have that huge impact on DevOps, which is super exciting. And speaking of super exciting, compliance. Everyone's excited by compliance, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Correct answer. As a bit of background, I used to work in compliance a long time ago, in a different century, in fact. So I have a little bit of experience with compliance, but I've also been keeping up to date on new regulations as they come in. So, once I moved into software, there's always been standards to adhere to, like PCI compliance and SOC 2 and SOC 3 and ISO 27001. And now we had this new regulation called DORA, which is slightly confusing for us because DORA for us is the research team at Google. But this is the Digital Operational Resilience Act in the European Union. But it gave us an opportunity to do a deep dive into what impact that regulation was having on teams, so that we could extrapolate in some ways to say each time a new piece of legislation comes in that means you have to adapt how you're working and how you're delivering software, what's the cost of that? So that's why we were inspired to do the report, because at the time we were surveying this, everyone was implementing, or if they were super proactive, had implemented those changes to meet the DORA regulations. And a couple of organizations said, oh, we haven't actually heard of this, and we're going away now to find out what we need to do. So we also helped a few people to hopefully meet their regulatory obligations. And as part of what we looked at how people approve changes to the software. And this is the first one. Charlotte, do you want to take us through this question of manual approvals?
So we essentially, when we collected the survey respondents, we asked them how many manual approvals are in their, approval chain. And we then were able to score the responses based on high performance and meeting their goals and meeting DORA metrics and all of those things. So you can see this graph here. We've got the score on the y-axis and the manual approvals, the actual number on the x. And you can see that there is a downward trend. So the score, your general software delivery performance score, is reduced if your manual approvals increases, if the number increases. So I actually was talking with Matt earlier today about this, but yeah, it's very obvious that there is a very distinct downward trend when you increase the number of approval steps in the approval chain, that your score decreases, and it's because of all these other bottlenecks that appear, right? And we'll go into them soon, but that's what this graph is stating.
So it's a bit of a throughput killer in terms of, if you need 6 approvals. I'm amazed that people need 6 approvals. That does sound like a lot to me. But yeah, that it's too much, and it's probably harming your throughput to such an extent that the economics of that approval is probably wrong. There's always this thing with risk where you have to kind of look at the economics. There is a cost to do something which is beyond any benefit you can ever achieve from doing it. And I'd say 6 approvals is probably in that zone. So yes, obviously if you have more than one approval, that does form a chain. And we looked at different kinds of approval chain, which is what we have here. If you can't read them all, don't worry. The idea is that we looked at, I've just made a change. Who do I need to get to sign off on that change to get it out the door? And you'll have things like my direct manager maybe is approving it, or maybe another department, maybe if security is a separate area and they have to approve it, it might go out there. And then there's also a concept of these cross-departmental committees who meet up to approve changes as like a whole group, sometimes in a big room with people explaining their changes to them and then trying to get them to say, yes, you can go live with it. What do we find here?
So we essentially, one of the key finding, which is really interesting, is that actually adding your direct manager into the approval chain was an accelerator to the approval process, which was really interesting, and probably, I think it probably challenged my assumption of approval process. But I found this really interesting. But when I thought about it on an organizational level, and through Steve's report, it makes sense because managers hold a certain level of authority in which, if it does need to go above them for a tick, it will likely just go through because the managers have previously, I guess, approved the process, said it was okay, said it was feasible, all of those things. So that was really interesting. Another thing is that including the team that is obviously asking, is obviously asking for the approval, also was likely to increase your performance score. And this also does make sense because the team knows about, they're requesting the approval. They know exactly what they're approving. They know why they're approving it, and they know how it's going to affect things and what it actually will do for them. So having them on the team was also a really, a really beneficial point as well.
This is an interesting social aspect to this, right? Because when the team is signing off on their own work, maybe that's a reminder to them to do some checks that maybe they might not have done if they were just firing the approval out into the ether. And then the direct manager is obviously well networked and well connected. So maybe it's easier for them to get that external team approval than it would be, if you're a developer just getting ghosted by an external team who maybe are under pressure from multiple development teams, and yours hasn't kind of hit that priority to get approved, but then it's just blocking your work. So there's a lot of social dynamics involved in this approval process, which is interesting. Surely a cross-departmental committee then does this all in one hit, right? Because we get all those people in a room, so it must be faster.
Looking at the graph, if you can see it, cross-departmental committee every time slows down approval process like dramatically, in that even if direct managers and teams are on it, they have the lowest performing, they're the lowest performing teams. And it's likely due to the fact that there are just normal scheduling errors for committees. And so perhaps if, there's a slight delay, you'll have to wait till the next review cycle, which delays everything. They're just normal delays, but they would slow down. They clearly do have an effect on, on performance scores because of the fact that they slow down the process. Yeah.
That makes sense. And from the conversations I've had with people after we published this, some people are trying to solve this by convening their change committee multiple times a week. But we don't really see any change committees working. What we really probably need to do is get back to some agile basics, making sure that our teams are cross-functional enough that we can cover the requirements that are needed. We also want to make sure that we're automating approvals when we can. If we're taking a software version and then we're running a scanner against it, and then approving that and saying, yes, I've run the scanner and I didn't get any errors, maybe that should be part of our deployment pipeline instead of a separate manual check. So I think there's a combination of things we can do. We can automate a bunch of checks. We can put the right people on a team so that they can sign their own work. And then when we do have a separate approval, handling that in the right way, using this kind of approval chain list, using that number of manual approvals graph, that's probably the way to look at it. So yes, that's how we kind of want to go. And we kind of have a bit more information on this because we have this diagram. And this is a combination of your approval chains, how many people have to approve it, and the number of people who can deploy. So having more people who can deploy, we want this number to be bigger. We found 4 or more people is a good number for who can trigger a deployment, combined with very low numbers of approvals, such as 1 approval. That's where your highest throughput comes from. And you can see that compared to every other way of doing things, this is by far the winner in terms of throughput. So if you want to do something which improves developer productivity, increase the number of people who can deploy and reduce the number of approvals. The jury has returned its verdict on this one, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think there's a number, and it's like if you have a single approval, it's 3 times. It has 3 times higher performance than the 6 that we saw before, which does make sense. We saw the chart, but also if you have 4 or more people, I think you have something like it's something like a 20% higher score in performance compared to a single, single deployers, one person deploying the software. And so it's really important to increase it seems like quite a simple addition or a simple change. I'm sure it's much more complicated, but I mean, just increasing the number seems like a logistical, I guess, a simple logistical process which makes so much difference to performance. It's really significant.
Yes, absolutely. And one argument people might have around this is because we're talking about throughput here. You could have the argument of it's no good going faster if that just results in worse reliability, like more errors after deployment. But again, we know from our research and from Dora's research that doesn't happen. When you increase your throughput, and you're doing it through the capabilities of continuous delivery and DevOps, it actually increases your reliability as well, because the things you're doing to increase your throughput are things like automation. And automation is far better at completing your deployment checklist than, Dave in operations is. No offense to anyone called Dave in operations. It's a common problem. Following a checklist is not a great thing for humans to do. So we will just quickly skip past the model here. That's just a little reminder of what we were talking about. Lightweight change approvals, reliable deployments. That gives you better throughput, and we know that helps achieve your organizational goals. And we also think it's going to help you achieve your governance, risk, and compliance goals too. So they're not competing with each other. They're the same thing. And we'll summarize because we're getting a bit short on time. Continuous delivery and compliance. Small, meaningful approvals are the way to go. They should be part of your deployment pipeline. Even if they're manual, you should have them integrated into your deployment pipeline, captured as part of those same tools. And you need to pool deployment rights. You don't want to have a single Brent who's in charge of your deployments. You want there to be multiple people. And that's kind of important as well for being able to handle deployments when someone's on holiday or if they decide to leave your organization.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our 3 reports that we've published this year. You can get them from octopus.com/publications. But we also have something exciting coming.
Yes.
Charlotte, tell us about this new report.
So I've been working on a report on AI, and everyone's doing it these days. So, it's not a new thing, but we just wanted to see, I guess, a number of things that I thought was missing throughout the literature now. And so we wanted to really go deeper into AI integration. So I guess current patterns of adoption and the metrics involved. And we actually have gone quite deep into difference in usage patterns across experience level. So on specific tasks, which are really interesting findings there. Not so dissimilar about what you would expect, but a few things that were really intriguing. And then its impact on software development. So we've focused on constraints. So we actually do go into a bit of a deep dive into the code review constraint. And AI is able to really, really benefit and save time on all these other tasks around it. But all of that code just being backed up makes this code review process longer, just because of the value stream, I guess, management workflow. It's not really because it does make code review slower. It's just because there's more code coming through, and it's just sitting there until the senior developer gets to it. We also go into hiring trends, which I've found really fascinating, and the evolving talent pipeline. So I guess how some of the roles may be changing due to AI integration. What does that mean for skill development, particularly for junior developers that in the next 3 to 5 years will be expected to perform at senior levels? It's a lot. It's really interesting. I'm finding it very interesting.
So there's lots of stuff coming up in this report, and I am super excited to see that when it comes out. So what we'll do now is I'll say to those of you joining from Australia, thank you for staying up so late to join us. I've enjoyed kind of going through these findings. It's been a good reminder of all of the cool and exciting stuff that we found over the past year. And I'm also excited about our artificial intelligence report, and also our platform engineering report, which is going to be a really deep dive to follow up on that platform engineering pulse that we did. So thank you very much.